One of the experiences I trust every homebrewer shares is the feeling of awe that comes from witnessing the conversion of wort into beer through the fermentation process. Even after 15 years, I still get giddy when I see the first signs of airlock activity, a nice fluffy kreuzen developing on top of my beer. The worst is when this takes too long. You all know the anxiety that comes from checking on a batch a day after pitching and seeing no action. This is why we love Imperial Yeast, who pack 200 billion cells of the purest yeast into each pitch-right pouch, which assures quick starts, healthy fermentation, and predictably great results. I strongly urge all of our listeners to check out everything Imperial Yeast has to offer and let them know that you appreciate their support of the Brülosophy Podcast while you're at it. All right, on to the show. Beer is fermented wort, and while it's entirely possible to ferment wort in pretty much any type of container, using a vessel designed specifically for the task can make the process easier and reduce the risk of an unintentional contamination. Now, these days, most commercial breweries rely on durable and easy-to-clean stainless steel tanks to hold their fermenting beer. For a while, such options were limited on the smaller scale, for us homebrewers at least, which likely explains the proliferation of plastic buckets and glass carboys among homebrewers. Nowadays, however, that's definitely not the case. This is the Brülosophy Podcast. I'm your host, Marshall Schott, and you are listening to the second episode in our exBEERience series, where contributor Matt Del Fiacco joins me to chat about our experiences using various types of fermentation vessels.
Awesome, man. I'm so excited to talk about this one just because, I remember being like a new home brewer, and I fermented I think like most people, I had like better bottles, like those plastic 3-gallon better bottles I fermented in. But I remember looking at like other things, like other plastic vessels or other just like glass vessels, and thinking to myself, like, can I ferment in this? With that, is this something I can use to make alcohol? So it's a really cool topic, and I am really excited to talk about it because I think that there's a lot of information kind of around it that goes into the consideration for each of these things. So
I get a lot of questions about just kind of typical brewing related stuff. Hey man, what do you prefer when it comes to this? What do you think is best, relative to this thing and all of that? This is one of those areas I actually do have quite a bit of experience in, just by virtue of the fact that I've been brewing for so long. I remember before better bottles even existed, Matt. We often get asked about our thoughts on this kind of stuff. So I'm kind of hoping this just clears some of that up. Okay, if you enjoy this show and you'd like to make sure it sticks around for a while, there are a few things you can do to help us out, like becoming a patron over at patreon.com/Brülosophy. By making a small monthly pledge, you'll receive rewards like access to unpublished contributor recipes, unique discounts at YakimaValleyHops.com, and an invite to a monthly live Q&A session with someone in the brewing world. Coming up next week is my friend and fellow podcast host, Caleb Schwecke from The Late Edition by Yakima Valley Hops, and past guests have included folks like Scott Janish, Gordon Strong, and Lars Marius Garschel. All past sessions are available on our private Facebook page to watch whenever you like. Learn more about becoming a patron over at patreon.com/Brülosophy. And another really easy way to support us is by using the links found at brülosophy.com/support. When you're doing your online shopping, you can even bookmark those so you don't forget to use them later. Your experience doesn't change at all, and we get a little kickback for the referral. All right, feedback this week is brought to you by Brewers Hardware, who specialize in triclover compatible sanitary fittings, conical fermenters, kettles, and brew stands. Brewers Hardware offers a variety of unique items for home and craft brewers, including high-quality stainless fittings at great prices with super fast shipping. Learn more at brewershardware.com, and don't forget to mention Brülosophy at checkout to receive a free gift. That's brewershardware.com. All right, Matt, this one is relevant to an episode that you and I recently did together. Matar Heller Al-Ghazi, he's from Israel, wrote in with feedback on our episode about Kveik yeast. He said, I loved the recent episode on the effects of fermentation temperature with Kveik yeast. I personally believe that Kveik yeast cultures will change the home brewing landscape in the near future and possibly commercial brewing as well. Think of a beginning home brewer in sunny California about to start their first brew. They're most likely lacking the means to control temperature. The most discussed beginner topics seem to be temp control, sanitation, and pitch rate. While Kveik can't help with sanitation, imagine this. No matter if it's a teaspoon or the full pouch or a few dried flakes, no matter if it's an air-conditioned room or a hot garage, it'll produce clean beer with no off flavors. That is a game changer. I already hear of commercial breweries adopting Kveik to save on yeast pitch cost. A single homebrew pouch can inoculate a commercial tank, he says, as well as cooling costs.
Yeah, I mean, I to your first comment, like changing the homebrew and the professional landscape, like I think we're seeing a degree of that already.
Absolutely, man.
You know, like I don't at all think that that's like just pure speculation on your part. I think you're reflecting a very real trend we're seeing in homebrewing right now. You know, like how long that sticks around or what kind of foothold it gains. That's all to be. I think that's fair speculation, but I think we're for sure seeing that upswing in like the use and the activity and all that stuff. And actually, like to your point, I just had a friend of mine from a homebrew club, Tyson Schroyer, it's down in the Abnormal Club down in Bloomington, and I was at the competition recently judging, and he gave me 2 beers fermented with Hornindal, which, you know, and one of those was like really pure. It was a blonde ale, like fermented at 64, really controlled. The other was similar to the experiment we did on Brülosophy, and it was done at like 84 or 86 degrees Fahrenheit, and I mean, honestly, like I have a hard time telling the beers apart, but the fact that they are relatively standing those temperatures, I think that's totally fair to say, is that like, hey, if you for sure can't have any degree of temperature control, this might be a place for you to start. I'm starting to think Kvike has a flavor. I don't know if I'm alone in that.
Well, we'll have to see about that. I mean, if you we've got we recently started a Facebook group that is different than the one for the live cast that we talk about every week. That's just for, patrons of Brülosophy at any level. And if you go on there right now and you just scroll through recent posts, I'd hedge a bet that maybe 60% are people who are using different, cultures of Kvike. Yeah. So it is having a huge impact. While I don't think we're going to see people moving away from certain common ale and lager strains too soon, I can absolutely see Kvike yeast becoming much more popular than it already is. I mean, it's already had a huge impact. I've mentioned my friend Brad from Full Circle Brewing a few times. I honestly think he might be using various Kvike strains more often than not these days. And his beers are getting really good reviews. It's pretty cool stuff. And, just to plug him again, I personally think we have Lars Marius Garschel to thank for that, for kind of introducing the world.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah, there's no way you could ever argue that he didn't have a massive impact and like the upswing in usage of that, for sure.
Yeah. So if it does end up, changing brewing as, altogether, Lars, you are the man. I mean, that's a crazy thing to be able to put on your belt.
You're the man regardless. If you happen to listen to this podcast, you are the man regardless. But
well, thank you for your feedback, Matar. If you have show feedback, you can send it to feedback@brülosophy.com. Leave us a voice message by calling 951-444-0320, or you can drop us a note on social media. Now, when I started drinking, the term sour was typically reserved for beers that were unintentionally contaminated. Thankfully, the modern beer drinker's palate has expanded and sour beers have become fairly common. A listener by the name of Rob from Missoula, Montana, sent me a Berliner Weiss he brewed and shared the following information about with. He says, "My name's Rob. I live in Missoula, Montana. I started home brewing when I was 18 in my dorm, and now at 23, I have 5 years of weird beer making behind me. I've always been somewhat afraid of sour beers and thought the Berliner Weiss was an easy style to start with. Instead of using a blend from the store, I thought it might be cool to try using my existing sourdough culture, local yeast, lacto, wheat, and malt."
1 minute beer review with Jersey and Tim.
It looks like a sour.
You look like a sour.
Hold on, let me see.
You look more sour by the hour.
I think it is. Just by looking at it.
I should give you.
I don't even have my glasses on.
You have no power here.
Bam!
You just stuck a sour by look.
By look. So good.
Jesus.
I'm blind as a bat, and I don't have my glasses on, and I could tell.
Oh, it is a sour.
I told you.
There's so many types of sours. There's the th and the flum.
You forgot the.
There's all those types, dude. We don't know. It's sour.
Mm.
You looked at it.
I like it.
You looked at it and knew it was a sour.
With my blind eyes, with no glasses.
With mind bullets.
Bam. And it's even good.
History of Timmy Boy is now a learning man.
It's not that.
It's not that what?
No. It's good. Very good. It's not like super sour like.
This is really sour. Timmy, let's memory lane this shit. I remember the first time Marshall was like, "You haven't had a sour beer?" And I was like, "What's a sour beer? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of."
The first time I ever had a sour beer was flat out of his shower.
What? You guys got out of the shower? And he gave you shower beer?
We were in the shower together.
No, sour beer, not shower beer. He's like washing your back with soap, and he's like, "Hang on, is that a growler? I love shower beer."
It was uncarbonated sour beer, and I'm like, "This is nasty."
In the shower.
Yes. Long as we got that clear. Yes, it was in the shower. Marshall and I were in the shower.
drinking sour beer. Wow, dude.
But then he carbonated it
sour
like
beer.
makes me feel good.
No.
This is good.
I don't know what to say. The first time you had sour beer was in the shower beer with Marshall beer.
It's good. I like it.
Yeah, it's good. It's really good. There's only certain types of sours, if this is a sour, of course, that I like. And I like the clean, crisp sours like this. I like sours that don't try to be all other things.
I'm going with 10 right there.
I do like how soury, citrusy, like clean and crisp it is. Dude, I will also give it a 9. For a total of... No. Let's rank it not as a beer, but as a sour beer. Oh. How would you rank it as a sour beer? Top percentage, 1%, 10%, 50%?
I'm going 75%.
Top 75%, that's like nothing. You don't understand how this works.
Okay.
Just say you like it a lot.
I do like it a lot.
Okay. Teach me. He means top 10%.
It's very good.
It's not a lot of these we finish before the end of the review. This is one.
Done.
That's delicious. Citrusy, sour. I don't know what else to say, but you nailed it with your eyes like Superman, and we like it a lot. I give it a total of it fucking tastes great. Jersey Tim's. What do you think?
Bam.
Yep. Stuck it.
Done.
Now, first off, I've never showered with Tim. I promise the first sour beers that I brewed were not using any quick methods, so I stored them in our guest shower that at the time rarely got used. And after, I don't know, a year of aging in there, I invited Tim in to have a sample, and that's where that came from. But man, I'll tell you what, Timmy is the sour king. This guy is nailing sour beers just by look alone.
Lucky. He got damn lucky, and you can tell him I said so. But that's, I mean, honestly, man, like it sounded like a really good beer. And I know Tim's like definitely been like swinging up in the sours recently. He's definitely been getting more into it, which is awesome. I love like following their palate expansion as like the time goes on.
I'll tell you what, my impression of this Berliner Weiss was that it was really, really well done. Very nice. I don't make sourdough bread, but to me, it seems kind of a ballsy move to kind of use his sourdough culture to use for beer. And I gotta be honest, man, this was a really, really nice Berliner Weiss. Do you do the sourdough thing, Matt?
No, I don't. That would definitely be something that if anyone's interested, they can hit up like Brian or Malcolm about.
Yeah.
But I don't do the sourdough as much, and it does seem like you said. Like I just don't know. Maybe I don't know enough about it, but it seems just real ballsy. Like, it seems
kind of risky.
Like there's so much in there, and there's way less, as far as I'm aware, there's actually like way less control in terms of, what actually is going into there. Cause I know some you can buy like pure sourdough cultures that like you can pitch or, quote unquote pitch. But then also like some people just mix in like a certain kind of flour and like just wait for that to go sour. And so I don't know how this was done, but man, like it definitely seems risky.
I know.
But it's awesome that it worked out. Like,
it worked out really well. It was a very good beer. And it kind of inspires me to want to motivate maybe Brian or Malcolm or whoever else on the crew keeps a living culture around at all times to maybe do a brew it yourself, making a Berliner Weiss with one of these. So thanks again for sending your beer in, Rob. And if you'd like to have your beer or any other fermented beverage reviewed by Jersey and Tim as well, you can email me, Marshall@Brülosophy.com, and we'll get you all set up. When we come back from this short break, our thoughts on various types of fermentation vessels. So I've been hanging out with brewers and craft beer nerds for a long time now, and while we do occasionally have our differences, one thing it seems we all share is a love of learning and trying new things, as well as saving a couple of bucks. Well, right now, Craft Beer and Brewing is helping fans of Brülosophy learn more while saving some coin by offering 20% off the price of a subscription to their awesome magazine. Chock full of brewing insights, tips, and recipes from industry experts, Craft Beer and Brewing is seriously great. I read every issue page to page myself. To get 20% off your subscription, all you have to do is sign up at beerandbrewing.com/Brülosophy. Want to brew quality craft beer at home? The Grainfather provides a brewing system with superior design, innovative features, and the latest technology, allowing you to brew professional quality craft beer at home. Mash, sparge, boil, and cool all in one unit, meaning there's less equipment to use, clean, and store. No need for burners or hot plates. Just plug it in and brew great beer. Then get the best out of your fermentation with the Grainfather conical fermenters and glycol chiller. Plus, enhance your brewing experience with the brand new free-to-use Grainfather community app. You can take your brewing tools and your recipes with you everywhere, use brewing calculators on the fly, manage your recipes, and monitor your brew session from anywhere. Use your mobile device to manage your Grainfather brew wirelessly, automate mash schedules, and multitask without removing any of the brewing hands-on fun. Grainfather products can all be found at www.grainfather.com. Plus, as a Brülosophy Podcast listener, get 10% off your order. Just use discount code Brülosophy19 at checkout. That's BRULosophy19 to receive 10% off your order. So head to shop.grainfather.com now to get this great deal. Chilling wort can be a chore, especially after a long brew day, but not with the exGEERitor Counterflow Chiller, which can chill a 5-gallon or 19-liter batch of wort in 5 minutes or less, leading to a strong cold break and clear wort in the fermenter. Brülosophy's Matt Del Fiacco uses the exGEERitor Max and absolutely loves it. In addition to improved chilling efficiency, every exGEERitor comes with a 5-year warranty that covers the entire chiller for manufacturer defects. If you're looking to up your chilling game and a CFC is right for you, head over to exGEERitor.com today. When I bought my first homebrewing equipment kit back in January of 2003, it came with a 6-gallon plastic bucket for primary fermentation and a 5-gallon glass carboy for secondary fermentation. Now, if you don't know what secondary fermentation is, you're probably fairly new to the homebrewing game. Most people aren't doing that step anymore, I don't think, so you might have to Google it. But anyways, since then, I've gone through a bunch of different fermenters, developing some thoughts and definitely preferences along the way. Matt, you've been brewing for a bit less than me. I think you were like 12 years old when I got my start, brewed my first batch, something like that.
Yeah, I was just learning about Peter Frampton actually as I was getting into that.
You were listening to Show Me the Way.
That's exactly it. No, yeah, I've definitely been brewing less than you, and so I don't have as extensive experience. And it's also interesting because you and a lot of other homebrewers out there went through this period of homebrewing not being kind of what it is now in terms of like popularity, but also just accessibility of gear and information and content. And when I started homebrewing, all of that was immediately accessible and cheap.
Yeah, that is a really good point, actually. When 2003, when I got my kit, there were very few people that I knew who were homebrewing at the time. Now, you can't kick a soccer ball without hitting somebody right. In the head. But I think one of the neat things in my experience back then, there was something really kind of appealing and fun about this, not just the DIY component to making your own beer, but what can you get away with using on the cheap? And we have definitely, and I will admit, I have definitely moved away from that. I really do get into more of the process side than I do the equipment stuff. And I feel like there are people who are still out there trying to do anything, but who really do, their focus is on how to I guess brew the cheapest batch possible. And you really can get away with making good beer using some really inexpensive stuff. Like for example, the 6.5 gallon classic plastic bucket. It is what I started with, and just for kicks, I'm a sentimentalist. I still have the very first plastic bucket that I bought with my kit, which I think is kind of fun. You've probably seen it in some of the pictures on the articles of my experiments. Have you ever used plastic buckets, Matt? It sounded like you started with better bottles.
I did start with better bottles, specifically because the 3-gallon better bottles are square and they could fit in the mini fridge that I had at the time. But I actively still use a plastic bucket, a 7-gallon plastic bucket that I use for primary fermentation for meads. Pretty much exclusively, because mead, if you haven't made it before, when you degas mead, especially with if you've been adding nutrients, do Tonsa method, it foams up like mad. Yeah. And I made the mistake once of fermenting it in like a 6-gallon carboy, a glass carboy, and it has that really narrow neck, and it sprayed the ceiling of my office with just this thick, disgusting sweet liquid. I had ants for several months. It was a nightmare. But so I still use it. I think that's one of the big pros that I would throw out there right now is that they are easy to rack into, to rack out of, to clean. It's easy to install spigots on plastic buckets. And I mean, honestly, considering some of the cons, I genuinely think plastic buckets have a huge advantage as primary fermenters if you're going to switch off to a secondary for some reason, or even rack off into like a keg for spunding or something similar.
Yeah, I don't disagree. In fact, when I felt like my my first plastic bucket had kind of had seen its better day. Essentially, it was kind of scratched up, and it was getting not white. It had changed colors, and I guess you could argue that those are some of the downsides to plastic buckets. But that with a wide opening, like you mentioned, to me it was the biggest benefit. I love being able to just pop a lid off and have access to whatever I need to access down in there. And then what I ended up doing though is I got these 8-gallon. I found these buckets that used to be really difficult to find. I found them on one website, probably, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago, and I forget what they're called. I think they were made by Brewcraft, but they had a spigot built in on the bottom, a nice little valve for racking. And that to me was all I needed. It was really fantastic. And so, you got the valve for easy racking. You've got a big opening on the top. It was great. It worked out well for me for about 9 months. And then, I've always fermented. Well, not always, but for the most part of my brewing, I've fermented in a chamber, which can get kind of damp. And probably the most aggravated I've ever been with a batch of beer was when I went to pull out a beer that was finished fermenting. And the spigot, the valve on the bottom of one of my buckets was literally caked in mold. And so to me, that was kind of I ended up having like a rage moment where I threw I racked the beer out and then threw the bucket in the garbage can, and my wife was trying to console me. Yeah.
I love this image of you like heartbroken about this.
The beer wasn't ruined. It wasn't ruined, but I couldn't use the damn spigot.
But of course, but you kind of call out, right? One of the big negatives regarding plastic just in general is that they are prone to scratches. They are prone to mold growth. They are prone to bacteria finding a hold because they're porous. Yeah. Like there's just a lot of issues that go along with using plastic. And I think for the most part, using plastic I think it's, again, like I use it still. I think it's totally fine, but you are taking a certain degree of risk just from an infection and a longevity standpoint. I mean, a bucket is not going to, that bucket you still have, the one that like you're first fermenting, I don't know how sanitary that continues
it's a mess,
to be.
Dude. It's an absolute mess.
I don't know that I'd use it.
No, I use it for gathering water, putting like leaf clippings in.
There you go. Okay.
Carry them over to the green bin. But another one of the big cons to plastic buckets that you'll read about, and I actually don't know how much of an impact this actually has on beer. But it is, you mentioned it being porous. It's also oxygen permeable. Not only the material itself, but the lid, it's been argued at least that oxygen can kind of leak its way in through the lid. And so, for those reasons, I'm not a bucket user anymore. I also don't make mead. I've heard a lot of people like to start their sour beers in a plastic bucket and then rack them over to something less permeable. But
I've heard that as well. And honestly, like it follows the same chain of logic because you're absolutely right. Like when we talk about like oxygen permeability, we talk about like the oxygen transmission rate, right? Like we're just like the degree to which I forget the exact thing. I think it's like milliliters. I think the number is like millimeters by something by over the course of 24 hours. Like it's an ingress of oxygen. But just pretty much any plastic material you're going to get, except PET is pretty good. PET is really solid, but
a little different there. Yeah,
it's just so oxygen permeable. And it's just a thing. Like if you're gonna have your beer and you're gonna forget it, if you're gonna ferment it in primary and you're gonna rack off really quick, or you're gonna do it like what I do with mead, where you are it's gonna be primary. Even a little oxygen ingress is okay during that period because fermentation's active. You're not going to see problems, but if you have a beer, it's finished fermenting and you're going to leave it for another week or two, or a mead or a cider or whatever it is, you potentially could see, pretty drastic or pretty dramatic results in regards to like how much oxygen's actually gotten into it.
Yeah. And in this day and age of really sensitive hazy IPA. You know, I'd be curious to see maybe a comparison. You know, we've done some firm vessel comparisons. We're not going to get too deep into those results, but shockingly, a lot of them really have come back showing that firm vessel, when everything else is as isolated as us homebrewers can get it does seem to have an impact. People can actually taste the difference. So
yeah, I mean the one that we've done like specifically for the plastic, it was only 10 people. I think there was like really early days of
it was a long time
ago. But 7 people got that one, and it was a basically a plastic bucket versus your PET carboy, which you know, a PET carboy, when we say it's different, it's because the oxygen transmission rate is so much lower. It's really really low for PET, which is awesome.
Yeah, and those PET carboys, that was what I went to when I got really angry. I'm no joke. I bought 5 or 6 PET carboys the day that I raged on my moldy freaking bucket.
Right.
And you know, the reason I went with that is that they had no spigots on them, so no valves to get moldy or gunked up. The downside for me to that was that I had to figure out another way, an easy way, you know, or a way that I experienced as easy of racking the beer out of the carboy. And I ended up finding what I don't know if there's an official term for them, but more beer calls them the sterile siphon starter. I bought a couple of those, and those worked out really well for me. I really do like the plastic carboys, the PET carboys. To this day, I still use them pretty much exclusively for when I'm making hard cider. And the main reason I do that is because when I've used valved fermentation vessels of any sort, I usually like to fruit my ciders, and I don't put them in any, you know, when you put them in a carboy, you're not really filtering that fruit out. It's too,
right.
The valves or the hole's too narrow. And so I use the carboys because I can adjust where I'm putting that racking cane above the fruit. They work out really well, in my opinion. And I know that there are a couple of the kind of newer, modern versions of PET type fermentation vessels. Another one I believe is the Fermonster, which Phil uses, and has really good things to say about. Really durable. You know, they're not going to last forever. If you drop them too hard, they might crack. But they're easy to clean, I've found, and they did well for me for quite a while, actually.
Yeah, I have nothing against PET carboys whatsoever. I think they're, especially like just in terms of price and in terms of like their overall weight, like it's easier to, if you have a couple clean carboys, it's just easier to move those around as opposed to like the glass vessels, and like you don't have to worry about potentially cracking and shattering them.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
That's maybe we can add that to our pro column in terms of the plastic ones, is like the chance of shattering is essentially zero. Like there's maybe a freak accident. But for the most part, no, you're not going to like be in a dangerous situation.
No, I think that possibly the biggest drawback, or one of the things that I get asked about most often, is how the hell do you get these PET carboys clean? A trick, I actually learned this from my brother, who started off using PET carboys thanks to yours truly and my recommendation to him a while back. But you know, he was having that issue that we all do, where even after a nice PBW soak, there would still be a ring of kreuzen on the, you know, kind of towards the top of the carboy. And so what he did is he just took a rag and got it wet with some nice hot water, maybe some leftover PBW cleaner in the carboy, and then covered the hole and swirled that rag around, and it does a fantastic job of wiping off all of that kreuzen ring. And so when I'm fermenting in carboys, that's just a normal part of my cleaning process, is doing that. And you mentioned glass. We should probably spend a little bit of time talking about glass carboys. I've never regularly fermented in glass carboys. Now, a lot of people who were, you know, initially afraid of plastic buckets, their only option for a while may have been glass carboys. I'm absolutely terrified of dropping one. I've seen some horrendous photos on the internet.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
Dude, I've seen stitches. I've seen people who are like, went to the hospital tonight because I dropped my carboy.
Yeah.
Which is, again, that's horrible. But I mean, just talking about glass in general, though, like when we talked about that oxygen permeability, it's non-oxygen permeable, which is amazing.
Exactly.
So the only potential oxygen ingress you're going to have is, you know, potentially from whatever bung or stopper you're using for your airlock. but they're also not going to get like scratched up, and you're not going to have that bacteria infestation in the same ways you would with plastic. Their life just in general for that same reason is longer. Like you can keep a glass carboy essentially indefinitely
if you're not clumsy. That's
exactly right. Don't rack hot wort into it.
Oh my God, yeah.
But like those scenarios, right, where it's indefinitely. That's maybe the good. Probably it's got to be this. For me, it's the second biggest con. It maybe plays into the first biggest con is that they are fragile. That like there's the potential for breaking it, which is the just so we don't like lose the narrative. The first biggest con is that they are real fucking heavy.
Yeah,
and when slippery. You have a bunch of wort in it and slippery, and couple that with their just like how fragile they are. Then it's not a great combination.
Yeah.
But I still use glass for essentially, like I was talking about mead. I use it for all the things that I'm going to age for pretty much any period of time. That's not going to be in a keg. I end up putting them in a glass carboy.
Yeah. And I think that's what glass carboys still to this day serve a great purpose for. I have purged my brewery of all glass carboys because I am one of those clumsy people who I'm the fact that I haven't broken a glass carboy in my day is shocking to me. I have used, again, like I said, I've never been a brewer who has regularly relied on glass carboys for fermentation. And I know that, even when 6-7 years ago, I remember it was still an argument that people were having, like, you got to use glass, man, you're going to make better beer.
Definitely.
The few times that I have done primary in a glass carboy were all for sour beers, and that was back. I talked about it with Beer Review earlier. It was back when my sour beers were just being made using more traditional methods. I'd pitch a culture or a blend culture of bacteria and yeast, and just let them sit forever and ever and ever.
Right.
And a testament to the fact that they are oxygen impermeable is that I wouldn't, with sour beer, you typically expect to see some sort of pellicle formation, not a sign that, a thing is working or going wrong, but it would not. I left one beer, a sour beer, I believe it was a blonde ale or like a Belgian blonde. And I left it primaried it in a glass carboy for about, I think it was 14 months. And it wasn't until I went and took a hydrometer sample using a turkey baster, 4 days later, all of a sudden now there's the pellicle. I mean, it was keeping every last bit of oxygen out of that vessel. So it does have its pros. I'm not seeing people use glass nearly as much today as I used to.
I believe that, and it's just, we have so many more options now. There's so much more accessible gear. I do have to like kind of quickly do a correction on myself though. I just remembered, I actually did not start fermenting with better bottles. I actually started fermenting in my desk in college in 1 gallon glass carboys that I still have for some reason.
I've done the same thing.
I need to correct that. I did start with that. And it actually, the reason I bring it up is there is one thing about glass and also like plastic to a degree that I do like and miss. Now that I ferment in either like corny kegs or I ferment in obviously like the Anvil fermenters, I miss being able to see beer ferment.
Yeah. Yeah,
I miss the visual of it because I remember being a new home brewer or like an intermediate home brewer and like looking at the clear fermentation vessels and like watching it happen. I love that. That's something I miss.
Yeah, that is the we're science minded people. We don't believe in magic. But I'll tell you what, man. If there's
speak for yourself.
I'm so sorry to offend you.
Yeah.
But that fermentation process is the most magical part of the beer making thing. To this day, I've said this a million times, but when I go out and I see airlock or blow off activity. From my fermentations, it's still just, I'm just sitting there like, God, it's going to be beer soon. That's so badass,
Are you? I'm always relieved. I never have like a sense of awe. I always hear the fermentation and I'm like, oh, thank God. Like, because I didn't
screw this one up.
Exactly.
Well, we talked a little bit about PET carboys, which is different than plastic, has a lower permeability. There's a lot of good stuff about it. Like I mentioned before, I've used PET carboys quite a bit, hundreds of batches I've put through PET carboys. Ray is still an advocate for the PET carboy. I think you can buy them for about $25 a piece. Spend about $20 on a sterile siphon starter, and you're set for a lot of batches of beer. It works great. Now, for those who still really do appreciate the bottom valve for racking, but who don't want to, invest too much in other materials, still like that plastic. There are HDPE tanks out there. I think the most common ones that I'm aware of are, hopefully I say this right, Spidel.
Man, I'm not the person to correct you on that. I'm sorry.
Spidel, Speedle. I've heard it always.
I've heard Speedle pretty free. I'm pretty positive that's wrong, but that is the one I also hear the most frequently.
So
Speedle.
So we're gonna go with Spidel because that's in my brain how I've been saying.
All right, cool.
These are really, really neat, purpose-built. It's not just a bucket it happens to be food safe from, the Home Depot or whatever. These are purpose-built fermentation tanks that are really, really quite neat. They have kind of a in between in terms of the size of the opening in the top. Everything screws on and into place, so it's nice and secure. There's seals, there's O-rings, and it does have that bottom valve to make racking your beer to however you're packaging a lot easier. They're really durable. HDPE, unfortunately, isn't as is a bit more opaque than PET, so you do lose out on the that fun part of brewing, which is watching fermentation happen. But for the most part, these tanks are lightweight and just really nice, really durable. I've had one for 2 or 3 years now. And it's still kind of in regular rotation when I'm doing single batch beers. I guess if I had to, talk shit on it, the one thing that I've struggled with is fitting 2 of them in my fermentation chamber at the same time. They're kind of bulky. They're a little bit cumbersome. But again, they're also bigger volume. I think they're 7 or 7.5 gallons, something like that, for the typical size ones. Now I've also had a 15-gallon Spidel tank. And I had that for 2 batches, and then I threw out my back, and so I don't have that anymore. But
no, I mean, and that makes a lot of sense. And 15 gallons of beer would be heavy in any vessel for sure. I do big batches of cider every year, and that's always a nightmare. But I will say, I know that you've done a little bit of a test on a glass carboy versus the Spidel tank, and it came back not significant at the time. But maybe another thing just to throw out there is that in theory, HDPE has a much, much, much higher oxygen exchange rate than PET or for sure glass and stainless steel.
Oh, sure.
That's something that is just to throw out there is HDPE it's very oxygen permeable as a material.
Yeah, and the thing about the Spidels, and I don't know if this plays into it or not, but they are the plastic is very thick. It's not thin. You pick up a standard Homer bucket or whatever, and that plastic is fairly thin.
Yeah, definitely.
The Spidel HDPE fermentation vessels are really bulky. I mean, they have they're nice and solid. They seem like they're high quality manufacturing. I've had no issues when I use them, and what I really love is unlike with any carboy that I've ever used, when I do any, it's mostly just dry hops, but if I'm making any addition to the beer during fermentation or towards the end of fermentation, I like to use those stainless sleeves.
Oh yeah,
piece of cake to do with a Spidel. I mean, you just open it up, plop it in, close it up. Really easy to clean because you can fit your whole arm or whatever cleaning wand you're using down in there and give it a nice scrub. Now, again, they are going to be, you can scratch these things, and there's that argument that bacteria can, or wild yeast can kind of hide out in the nooks and crannies of small little scratches and end up ruining subsequent batches of beer. So
yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that there's a lot of just cautions maybe around it. Pretty much with anything else in brewing, it's all contextual to how you are performing and what you're doing. I've never really used an HDPE vessel. I've pretty much just done the PET, glass, and stainless steel. Mm-hmm. But I will say the Spidels look super nice, and I know a lot of professional breweries that aren't using the Spidel specifically, but that are using HDPE vessels at the very least for a quick primary or for some kind of transportation of an initial fermenting liquor. I'm thinking specifically of cider. I know a lot of cider that comes in HDPE vessels. So, but yeah, I think that it's definitely worth considering. I think they're really cool. They're cost effective. It has a lot of the pros that plastic does in general. So it's definitely an option.
Yeah. Well, so final kind of story that I have about these tanks in general. I have a buddy who stopped using his because he was convinced that now it sort of like plastic buckets, these Spidell fermenters will start to kind of take on the color of beer, if you will. And they do, it turns from a white to kind of a pale brown, beigeish color. He was convinced that this was having some sort of an impact on the flavor of his beer. Now, I haven't used mine enough to determine if that's actually happening. Mine is still fairly white, but it does make some sense to me on kind of if I just be as simple as I possibly can, that if color is sticking around, that perhaps there are certain compounds that are also sticking around that could have some sort of an impact on other, qualities of the beer. So it's just something to keep in mind. Again, they're not that expensive. I forget what I paid for mine 4 or 5 years. It was like maybe $40 for a 7-gallon or 7.5 gallon version, but they're pretty cool. But anyways, those are some of the common types of fermenters, some of the most common types of fermenters out there, and many of which we've used collectively. We've used all of those ones. When we come back, we're going to turn our focus to stainless options. When dumping wort-soaked grain and leftover low-gravity wort while cleaning up after a brew day, did you ever wonder what your true efficiency would be if that wort made its way to the kettle instead? Using the brew bag, a fabric filter for all mash tuns and brewing methods, allows you to capture every last drop of wort. Not only does this increase kettle efficiency, it lowers your grain bill, which saves you money. Throwing wort in the trash is like dumping a 12-pack down the drain and just doesn't make sense. Use the brew bag and leave no wort behind. I've been using these filters for a long time and recommend them to everyone. I never have to worry about a stuck sparge and cleanup is fast and easy. Go grab yourself a brew bag fabric filter at brewinabag.com and be sure to use code TBP17 at checkout to get a discount on your order. Family-owned Atlantic Brew Supply is the largest homebrew shop in the Southeast. No gimmicks, no multinational corporate overlords, and no BS. They offer exclusive malts, yeast, and more from local artisans, as well as award-winning recipe kits. They also sell professional brewing gear and cask equipment from sister companies ABS Commercial and Cask Supply. Most ingredients are available by the ounce, plus Atlantic Brew Supply has an on-site calculator to help you craft your best brew. Orders are processed same day, and 2-day shipping is guaranteed for East Coast customers. Get 15% off your first order using promo code BREWPOD, that's BRUPOD at AtlanticBrewSupply.com. After a long brew day, the last thing I want to do is waste more time chilling wort. I've tried so many different options, and ultimately I settled on the super efficient immersion chillers made by Jaded Brewing. With the King Cobra and Hydra, I'm able to chill my entire batch of wort from boiling to just a few degrees above groundwater temperature in as little as 6 minutes. If an immersion chiller is right for your brewery, then do yourself a favor and check out all of the rad options Jaded Brewing has to offer at jadedbrewing.com, and be sure to let them know Brülosophy sent you. As every brewer knows, the best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world, carrying everything from classics like Cascade to modern favorites like Galaxy and Mosaic, as well as other ingredients and gear. Yakima Valley Hops has it all. And don't forget to check out their new podcast, The Late Edition, where the YVH crew goes into depth on our favorite plant with industry experts. Head over to YakimaValleyHops.com now to see all they have to offer, and subscribe to The Late Edition wherever it is you listen to podcasts. So when I was fermenting in buckets, I remember thinking there was no reason for me to ever use anything else. My beer was good enough. Then I had the valve issue that I talked about earlier, and I converted to PET carboys, and I told myself the same thing, that these were good enough. My beer was tasting good, no reason to upgrade. And then I had the opportunity to use a stainless fermentation vessel. Of course, there are many different options nowadays for these stainless vessels. Matt, let's start with what is probably one of the most convenient options for homebrewers, at least those who keg. Something I've actually yet to try myself, and that is fermenting in corny kegs.
Yeah, so this is something that I have a lot of experience with. I have done my fermentation in corny kegs for quite a while, and there's a lot of benefits to this. I will say, like, for people who are worried about cost effectiveness, like, it is cheaper to get a used Pinlock keg than it is to buy a 5 or 6 gallon glass vessel. The stainless steel is impermeable to oxygen, and we can have a little bit of a debate if you want about like what the permeability of those gaskets are on a keg, but I'm just not going to touch it because it's so low. It doesn't matter.
It's basically nothing, so we'll call it nothing.
We're going to call it nothing. It's not nothing, and if you want to get into that, go for it. It's all you, but it is nothing to me. But that's definitely something. So they're impermeable to that. They are really, really durable. They're really light. You can rack in the wort little warmer if you want. If you're only chilling to like 90 degrees, you can rack right into a corny keg, and they are just good to go. They're a little bit difficult to clean. That's a major complaint of mine. It's not easy to fit your arm in there and like clean something out if you have krausen or you have like some kind of material that's floating around. And then of course, like there's probably 2 major cons that people see when they think about fermenting in a corny keg. Maybe 3, but the 2 that I'm thinking of are 1, you need to cut the dip tube. If you have the dip tube fully at the base, all of the trub and the yeast will settle onto the bottom of that beer, and it will clog your dip tube, and it is a huge bitch to get that wort out, or to get that beer out afterwards.
Yeah, that to me, that's one of the main reasons that I've found myself avoiding using corny kegs for fermentation, is that I absolutely hate dealing with clogs in any form. They bother the crap out of me.
Once you take care of the dip tube, you're typically okay, but it happens. It's happened to me, and in the moment of it happening, it is the worst thing in the world.
What the hell do I need to do to fix this?
Exactly.
The other thing that, and again, this is coming from somebody who's never actually tried it for himself, but the other kind of the thing that kind of detracted me from using corny kegs is that I believe most people who are fermenting in kegs are brewing maybe half gallon to a full gallon less volume in the end.
Well, let's talk for a second about the arbitrary nature of the 5-gallon batch, Marshall.
We don't
let's
need to get into
that.
Listen, I like having more beer, not less beer.
You're right. You are absolutely right. Typically, yes. I usually can get away with fermenting about 4.5 gallons of wort in a vessel. But yeah, absolutely. And as much as we can say that the stuck dip tube is a pain when you're racking, it is also a pain to have a clogged or dirty post that had krausen pouring out of it. That is a huge issue.
So when you are fermenting in kegs, and we can maybe spend a little bit of time talking about the kind of a spin-off topic, which is spunding. We have a whole show on that if you want to really dig into that. But so you attach a blow-off tube and you connect that blow-off. I mean, you could easily do that cool cold side oxidation, harvest your own CO2 thing that I've been doing lately.
Yep.
All of that stuff is totally possible. Are you typically getting a blow-off though? Do you typically see krausen, flowing out of your blow-off tube, which you attach it to the gas post, right?
I do. I attach it to the gas post, and the blow-off tube just runs into liquid, just like any other blow-off tube. I don't see any krausen typically, and I mean that's just because I am doing smaller batches intentionally.
Yeah.
So I have not seen that be an issue. I know that it does happen, especially if you have a little too much liquid in there. It can for sure be a thing, but definitely I just attach it to the gas post, which actually makes the rest of things really convenient, where if I'm going to cold crash or I'm going to do something separate like that, I can just remove the gas post, and that is now a sealed up vessel.
Yeah.
We're all good. It's all sealed up. And then if you want to spund, you can just detach quick refresher, spunding is just using the pressure of fermentation to carbonate your beer. And you can just attach a spunding valve to the gas post and carbonate right there, or you can rack and then do a closed transfer from a liquid post to a liquid post. And this is maybe a con. You have to use CO2 to force the wort/beer from one vessel to another. That's that, and it gets expensive.
Yeah, well, I mean, I blow through CO2 these days because of my fears of cold side oxidation. So whatever, that is what it is. One of the things that I've wondered, and I don't think I've ever asked you about this, Matt, is have you ever? I'm sure it's entirely possible. I'm curious if you've ever, fermented, carbonated, and then consumed and served a beer out of the same corny keg.
All the time.
So when you're doing that, you are literally leaving, a 3 to 4 inch yeast cake of Trub at the bottom of the keg, and that doesn't have any impact on the flavor or quality of the beer that you can tell.
No, man, I drink quick.
I mean,
that's the thing, right? So yes, so I've done, and just to take that more seriously, I've done that before, and I don't do it all the time, like especially for the Brülosophy batches, which is the majority of what I actually end up brewing. I try to stick to as many best practices as possible, just for the sake of what we're doing, and I try not to cut any corners. But when
avoiding the bullshit, I know exactly.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. Yeah. But when it's just me, I actually just did this recently when I'm trying to like tweak the systems a little bit. I just did like a batch of IPA, and I fermented it and carbonated it and drank it from that vessel. And honestly, like, because my dip tubes are cut about, I think it's about a half inch cut on those dip tubes. The Trub settled enough to the point that I was still getting like clearish beer. I didn't notice any off flavors or anything bad. It was all in the keg, or it was all in my kegerator the entire time. So it was cold. It was delicious. And I mean, obviously, like, that's probably the most oxygen-free vessel I'm going to get, other than what's potentially introduced by CO2, which again, negligible. So it works fine. Long-term storage might be different. I'm 100% behind the idea that might change, but for a beer that I drank in 2 or 3 months, I didn't notice any problems.
So you mentioned IPA. We'll move on to other types of fermenters as well. I just think corny kegs are a really interesting option for homebrewers. But you mentioned IPA, and I'm curious what's your procedure for dry hopping when you're making a dry hopped beer in a corny keg?
So I'm one of those people who dry hops during fermentation. I don't dry hop afterwards.
Yeah.
And I also turn around that beer relatively quickly. So what I typically end up doing is I will usually like make an IPA, pitch yeast, and then about 4 or 5-ish days later, and I usually ferment somewhat cool, like usually 60 to 64 degrees maybe Fahrenheit. But make that, and then I will open up the fermenter and add I use the stainless steel sleeve just like you do.
Yeah.
And then put it in the fermenter. I'll wait like 2 or 3 days. And that's really the extent of the time that I dry hop anything is 2 or 3 days. And that's per the Wolf paper and just experience.
Yeah.
I don't really dry hop longer because like potentially grassy off flavors. And after those 2 or 3 days, I will rack to a new vessel or a serving vessel, and then actually like attach a spunding valve and crank the temperature up and just hope that I'm not done fermenting. And then like once... That's exactly it. So I wait for that. I try to ferment a little cooler and then ferment more intensely later to hopefully get enough carbonation. But otherwise, I've seen people do really cool things where I've seen some people who have done, like obviously they just do oxygen purges, where you can just use CO2 and repeatedly purge the headspace, and that way you can dry hop pretty well. I've seen people who do similar to what you do, Marshall, where they use fermentation or they use CO2 to push the oxygen out of a vessel, and then they'll kind of like a day or so beforehand add hops to that, and then let it purge it a little bit more. You have a lot of options using the kegs, and like honestly other closed systems as well.
Yeah, no, I think it really is for somebody who's looking to maybe move away from carboys in general or buckets, and get into a really inexpensive method for low oxygen, cold side fermentation and transfers and whatnot. I think this is a really good place to start. Now, of course, I think it must have been 4 or 5 years ago at this point where I started to see really neat products hitting the market that were, in essence, replications of the standard fermentation bucket that were just made of a much more durable material, stainless steel, and had a lot more options to them. I used the SS Brewtech brew buckets. I've still got those. I still use them when I'm doing side-by-side experiments. These are really, a lot of people look and say, oh, it's overkill. If you're really into brewing and you're brewing as often as I am, and you want something that's going to last you forever, stainless steel is a good option for you. And it costs a little bit more, but again, you're not replacing these. They're not scratching. They're not hanging on to anything that can ruin your beer. I've had nothing but positive experiences with these brew buckets. A couple notes that people commonly ask me about. With these buckets, they come with a small racking can, or a little dip tube that attaches into the back side of the valve. Again, the brew bucket has a nice little conical on the bottom to capture all of that trub. You can, if you cold crash in the brew bucket, you can turn the valve, and that actually moves the dip tube on the inside to above the trub line. You can rack out of that. What I ended up finding out was that, for the most part, with the types of beers that I make and the way that I make them, again, I filter out my dry hops. Without the dip tube, the hole from the backside of that of the valve is almost always above the trub line. So I don't actually use the dip tubes anymore. I've repurposed those for something else, actually. But that's kind of a little trick that I've been doing. A lot of people have asked me about it and started doing it themselves. It seems to be working well for them as well. The only real downside to at least this version of a stainless bucket fermentation vessel for me is that most of them don't really have the capacity to hold too much pressure. And with my move into wanting to have, I'm really valuing sealed fermentation. That's the one struggle that I've got. So I started, for example, and I know that Jake and some other guys on the crew are doing the same thing. I just stopped cold crashing, or I started using our Brülosophy lock TM. And that worked out really well. I've made some really great, New England IPA or IPA in general, using the brew buckets. They work fantastic. And I think, for the price, you've got a fermentation vessel that's going to take you well into the future.
Yeah, you definitely do. And especially, like, I've been using those Anvil fermenters for a little while now, and I would consider them probably like a bit more of a budget option for a lot of people, and like in that market. And they're really nice as well. Like, they definitely are holding up really well. But like you said, can't really hold pressure too much. I honestly think it's like 1 PSI is what they're rated to, similar to the SS Brewtech material.
Yeah.
So, but that is what it is, and definitely, like, I still actually use those, and then I'll end up either just racking normally, or I will rack around 4 or 5 days and then spun in the actual serving vessel, which is really nice typically. But they last forever. They're great material. They're not going to shatter like glass. They're not going to be they're not going to have the short shelf life of plastic. And definitely, sure, they're a little pricier, but in retrospect, they're kind of not that much more expensive than actually like purchasing a bunch of plastic.
Exactly. Well, and then, I think there's value in security. My therapist taught me that. But there's, the more secure one feels about whatever it is in life, there's value in that. It makes life a little bit better. And knowing that stainless steel was hand cleaned by me, has a nice big opening, just like a regular bucket. So it's so easy to get in there and clean, and you can scrub it down and not worry about scratching it. And then racking wort into there, I just feel confident. And there's something about using stainless that just makes me feel safer, I guess. Not like I'm going to hurt myself, but I'm projecting onto my wort now.
Right.
I want it to feel safer when it's in there. And again, no issues that I can really think of besides the PSI thing. I guess one of the things, this actually was a complaint that somebody sent into me, and then once they reminded me of it, or made me think of it, I was like, damn it. Now I think about it every time. Is some of these buckets, I don't know about the Anvil, but the SS Brewtech brew bucket doesn't have any coating around the handles. So if you're lifting up like I do, I rack my wort from my kettle into the bucket, and then I carry it over my firm chamber and have to lift it up into the chest freezer. It can kind of hurt your hands a little bit, but it's not that big of a deal.
No, it's not. And the Anvil doesn't have anything like that. I will kind of say, like, along with the security thing, I feel the same way actually about like stainless. I always feel better about it just from like both a cleanliness standpoint and also like obviously a durability standpoint. But I will also say, like, my my feeling of security, unfortunately, assuages a bit my diligence in terms of replacing the plastic parts that exist within that system.
That's a good point, man. And
that's big.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That is something that I have struggled with as well. And because of my laziness, I've actually missed changing out a valve, and thankfully, or not a valve, an O-ring on the bottom valve, the racking valve of the SS brew bucket. I didn't realize it had broken off. It just got old or whatever, and it fell off.
Right.
Thankfully, I was just filling my brew bucket with sanitizer, so I didn't lose any wort. But yeah, it didn't hold it. I mean, there was sanitizer all over my garage, so you got to pay attention to that stuff.
Yeah, you definitely do. It's just another thing to be cognizant of. I mean, in all of of course, like if you're going to have a spigot, you're going to deal with the fact that some of those parts are silicone or plastic. I mean, obviously silicone, but like silicone's also like pretty oxygen permeable, so you can do that with what you will. But yeah, it's just another thing to be aware of. But for the most part, I love those stainless vessels. Just like I love corny kegs, I love the anvils. So it's definitely an option. But Marshall, like recently, you started playing more with what I would call like maybe the next upgrade.
Yeah.
Something that's like a step above what we, like kind of like the stainless bucket replicas, right? Something where it's like we have this plastic bucket, let's make it stainless so it's this much better. Now we've got what, it's kind of like the emulation of pro fermentation vessels that are starting to see a lot more popularity.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, I want to get this out of the way before we move any further. I'm going to be very opinionated here in the coming few minutes.
Sure, man.
There is absolutely no need for any of the types of vessels that we're talking about. You purchase what you can afford. You use what works best for you. And you can make good beer using a $7 bucket as you can using a $2,000 conical fermenter. I truly believe that. But we're homebrewers, and we still like to have conveniences. And there are some neat things that you can get from some modern gear out there. And I'm telling you right now, I recently started using the new Spike Flex Plus. Now they have their Flex line has two main versions. The Flex, which will hold, I believe, 2 to 3 or 2 to 5 PSI of pressure. It's a little bit more bucket-like in its styling, and it's got some really neat features that we'll get into as well later. But I've got the Flex Plus from Spike. And this thing is, I didn't expect to like it nearly as much as I do. Is it perfect? It's not perfect, but I'll tell you what, it has changed my brewing game on the fermentation side, hands down. On the cold side in general, these are those, I refer to these as sort of unitank style fermenters. SS Brewtech has their unitank. It does a lot of the same stuff. I do think it might have a few more features that the Flex Plus doesn't. One of them being a dump valve so you can get rid of the yeast or the trube and then do your carbonation and whatnot directly in the tank. Now Jake is using those. He absolutely loves them as well for all the same reasons that I like my Flex Plus. Now I don't mind not being able to dump the trube because I have zero interest in carbonating beer and serving it from the vessel that it fermented in.
It's so easy though.
I get that it's easy, and no, I do, but I serve my beer out of I don't have room in my keezer to fit a unitank anyways, so it's just so easy for me to rack the beer out of the firm vessel into a sanitized keg. And I've already talked about in our cold side oxidation show my CO2 capture device and how I do all. So it literally, I kegged a beer the other day and the keg was already prepped because I'd already pushed all of the sanitizer out of it using naturally produced CO2. So all I did was connect a couple of sanitized hoses, open up a valve on the very low pressure CO2 tank, and I was kegging, and it took me less than 2 minutes to get going on that. The other nice thing about I think all of the unitanks are sort of like this. They just have all of these crazy features. The openings are very big, just like a bucket. So you can take off the lid and get in there and scrub it all out and make sure it's perfectly clean. But when you put the lids on, I think both the unitank from SS and the Flex Plus both have a 4-inch viewing port on the top, so you can still watch your fermentation. It's not easy in a dark chamber. You have to shine your flashlight on it, but you can see it. Most of them have some form of a sampling port, so you can very easily go down without opening the lid or without introducing any oxygen at all. You can go down and sample some of your beer. You can take hydrometer measurements. That's what I've been doing now. Is I'm back to taking hydrometer measurements before I keg. I just love it, and being able to sample the beer along the way without risking any O2 exposure. If you like to ferment under pressure, same thing with basically if you're using a spunding valve on a keg. With the Flex Plus, with the Unitank, with these Unitank style fermenters, most of them will have some form of a way to ferment under pressure. With the Flex Plus that I'm using, it actually has a cool little accessory that has a 15 psi PRV, so you don't have to put a spunding valve on or anything. It will start relieving pressure once it reaches above 15 psi. Just a badass piece of gear, man.
That sounds really nice, actually. That sounds really great. And one thing you didn't call out, Marshall, and I actually don't know if the Flex Plus has this, but I know for sure the Unitanks do, is along with like some of these more advanced, I guess advanced is a weird word, but I'm going to say it. Advanced fermenters is the potential to use glycol control for your actual temperature control. And if you've seen like Malcolm's setup or Jake's setup in regards to their glycol chillers, and I don't think Malcolm has Unitanks. I'm not positive.
No, he's using we'll talk about these in a minute. He's using the SS Brewtech Conicals.
That's it. That's exactly it. So, but that glycol chilling, I mean, it's a bit smaller footprint than obviously a chamber that would fit both of those fermenters. There's a degree of control, and it's just another like quality of life thing. But when we talk about glycol, we are starting to get into a bit pricier than what I would consider most homebrewers like immediately open to.
But you know what? There are homebrewers out there who want that, and that is
I know, man, and it's there.
Yeah,
and it's accessible.
The
and it's
fact
awesome.
that it's there is, I think, is such an awesome testament to the fact of how fast and how huge homebrewing has gotten.
Totally.
It's so rad. The only other downside to me, besides the price, I mean, people are always going to call out price. Nothing is ever the right price. I get that. Don't worry. I get that. But the one of the bummers to me about these Unitank style fermenters is they tend to be pretty squat, which means that space, because they're good volume, right? I think between 7 and 7.5 gallons. So it'll hold a lot of wort. You can make a full 6-gallon batch without having any issues with blow off or anything like that. The problem is the footprint on them is quite big. So, I'm still using the brew buckets for my experiment fermentations because I'm doing 2 side by side, and that's what'll fit in my 10 cubic foot freezer. With the Flex Plus, at least, I can't speak for the Unitank because I haven't used it. I can only fit 1 in my 10 cubic foot chest freezer. But the nice thing is I still have room for 2 kegs, one with sanitizer in it, and then one that the sanitizer is going to get pushed to using that naturally produced CO2. So it doesn't bother me too much. But for me personally, it's single batch brewing. The only other thing I really wanted to comment on with these kind of modern Unitank style fermenters, they are almost always tri-clamp fitting based. And so everything on them, you've got no NPT, so you've got nothing that can hold on to gunk and potentially bacteria or beer spoilage stuff. TC fittings are incredibly easy to keep clean. The Flex Plus comes with a fairly large and arguably unnecessary but really badass butterfly valve, that has a TC on the outside as well, so you can connect any number of fittings to that. It is really neat. And like you were mentioning with the glycol thing, that 4-inch viewing port on the top, all you do is take the plexiglass viewing port off, use the TC clamp to connect a coil chiller from, I believe, most any glycol setup you can use on this. And there you have it. Now you've got a glycol chilled, fermentation vessel. I think it's pretty badass. Yeah. Now, of course, the upgrade from there, and again, you said advanced. I think upgrade is kind of a dumb word as well, but we'll call it what it is.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, they're convenient ways to talk about this. They're not exactly right, but they're close enough.
Yeah, we're not judging anyone who doesn't want to use any of these. That's basically what I'm trying to say.
I opened the show with I use buckets. So
yeah, exactly. But is the conical fermenter? I don't have any hands-on experience using conicals outside of what little help I've given like professional brewers in my day. But Malcolm is using the SS Brewtech Conicals. I know a lot of people who have moved to conical fermenters and love them. There are some drawbacks. I mean, I think for the most part, they share a lot of the same positives as what we were just talking about, the unitank style fermenters.
Most definitely.
You can use glycol on them. Some of them are glycol jacketed even. Some of them you drop a coil down into, like the Chronicles, and you control the fermentation temperature that way. The reason I start off talking about fermentation temperature is because you can't really lift up a conical fermenter and put it into a chest freezer and expect to be able to close said chest freezer when you're done. They tend to be quite big, quite tall, and so you got to figure out some other way that maybe you don't have the ability to control fermentation temperature the way we do normally.
Yeah. I've seen some people use like those stand-up beverage chillers, like the really tall refrigerators, essentially. Yeah. I've seen those and they seem to work okay, but you're definitely right. Like, that's maybe a huge con for those is that they're large and they tend to be fairly bulky.
Yeah.
And just in terms of the conical, like the obvious potential theoretical pro, and I'm just going to caveat the hell out of this because I am not convinced on the homebrew scale that we have the hydrostatic pressure for this to be a problem.
Yeah.
But you don't have, of course, as much wort to trub contact. Like it all settles and focuses down in that conical, and you are in way less contact and you have less exposure and you're not going to have as much like autolysis and yeast cell death. So there's a potential pro that they're structured in such a way that you're going to have better beer. Now that said, at the pro level, that makes so much sense to me. It makes all the sense in the world. At our level, it's a lot less pressure, and so I don't know, but maybe I'm willing to be wrong.
Well, and I'll tell you what, and to add to that, it's funny that you do use the word pro so often because to me there's no. Well, we're talking about pros and cons, but there's no piece of fermentation gear that you can get that better emulates a professional or commercial brewery than a conical. But another added benefit, and again, we talked a little bit about this with the SS Unitank, is that you can dump that yeast, you can dump that trub, you can typically they will hold a decent amount of pressure. Again, they tend to all be tri-clamp based. I mean, there's a lot of positives to conical fermenters. Really, the only drawback for me, and I'll be honest, it's one of the reasons that I never took that step in purchasing a conical fermenter for myself, and I was on the verge, but I could not figure out a good way to control the fermentation of two of them without having an upright freezer, and that is, I have a buddy here in town who was borrowing a friend's conical for a while, and that's how he did it. He built a little ramp so he could roll it up into the freezer, and he'd rack his wort over using a pump, from his brewing station. It all worked out, and the beers were good, but I think it does require a little bit more forethought. Those are all of the types of fermentation vessels or at least that we could come up with for this show. One thing, we have a whole show on it already, and I get it. But one thing I just want to make a point to say is that with each of these types of vessels, there are ways that you can work to reduce cold side oxidation. I know a big reason for a lot of people making a decision to, I'm going to use the word again, but to upgrade to something maybe a little bit more expensive or a little bit more frilly is to avoid cold side oxidation. I think it's a good excuse for us to feel better about the purchase that we're making. But I've talked to many people since the cold side oxidation episode who are fermenting in buckets, who have incredible ideas for ways to reduce cold side oxidation using things as simple as plastic buckets. So, but those are our thoughts on various types of fermentation vessels. If you feel like we missed anything or perhaps mischaracterized something, feel free to let us know. Matt, any final words before we wrap this episode up?
No, I think we covered just about like what's going to be conventional usage for a lot of these. Like, of course, there's, concrete vessels that people are fermenting. That's a lot of pro brewers I'm seeing now are trying to ferment in. And definitely, I know there's some fermentation in oak vessels. But yeah, I think this really covers what most home brewers are going to use. And I actually really like your point that, there's a lot of ideas that people are pitching out there in terms of making good beer using any of these, because I think that's 100% realistic and possible. I don't think there's anything necessarily always consistently better about stainless steel over plastic. Yeah. I think the word you used, previously, I don't even think it was the word you used, but just like the idea of planning, the idea of like it's another consideration. I think that's all it is. It's just like you have to tweak what equipment you're using to your system and to what results you're getting and adjust along the way. But I don't think you should ever feel restricted by the fact that you can't afford a big stainless steel one. But I would say corny kegs are super cheap. Think about that. But just, like that's all it is. It's just planning. It's just thought about it. It's just beer. It's going to be great. So I am a fan of all of these.
Yeah. I think they all work. But I think what both of you and I agree with is do what works best for you and your brewing setup. All right. Don't forget to head over to brülosophy.com to keep up on all of the fun, sciencey brewing stuff we're up to. The Brülosophy Podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to brülosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit patreon.com/brülosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brülosophy Podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey cause it suits my bro. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman no more.